got top 4 answers on the board. We asked 100 women.
Tornado warning just issued for parts of the area. We knew that we'd have this potential as we move through the overnight hours, that if we could get a thunderstorm as the wind energy would start to increase, it would be possible that we could get a tornado warning. We've got our only tornado warning, so we haven't had any tornado warnings other than this one that's been in effect for our area. And this is basically the bottom line for us. There's one tornado warning that's in effect for the whole area. I'll show you the location, show you the watch here. Tornado watch until 10 p.m. includes Perry, Meade, Hardin, LaRue through Marion County, and this tornado warning is only in a rural part of our viewing area. This is only in one county, which would be our far southeastern. This is Taylor and into Adair County, the only county right now under a tornado warning, and we've seen some rotation increasing on this storm. I kind of mentioned this on social just a few moments ago, that we were watching the rotation come up on this storm. Weather Service issued the tornado warning for Adair and Taylor County, and I will tell you, if it was me, would I have issued this? I would have. I think that this is fully justified to have that tornado warning on it. Where is the storm located? Where is the most intense part of the storm? So the rotation right now is very close to the Kane Valley area. And this is just north of Kane Valley by basically about 3 miles near the Holmes area. And I'll show you a scope inside this thunderstorm so we can get a sense of where that rotation is. It is basically moving on top of the Holmes area. It is increased in rotation over the last couple of scans and tightened up. And so it is justified to issue a warning on this. What does this mean for Columbia? The tornado warning right now is going to be just to the northeast of Columbia. So that's good for the county seat of Adair County, but there's no question there is rotation on this. Rick, you've been looking at this storm from Storm View 3D.
Right.
And over the last couple of scans, we went from looking at rotation that was more broad to tightening rotation. And now we're in a scenario where we're looking, how much gates, gate to gate are we looking at in terms? Across that, it looks like maybe about 50, 60 mile an hour rotation.
There's about 39 on the outbound.
Okay. And this is in knots, by the way.
Knots, right. And again, probably 10 max.
So maybe about 60 miles an hour rotation. But it is what we call gate to gate. And what that means is if you see the reds and the greens are right on top of each other. So the radar is clearly seeing rotation in this storm. It's not elite.
Right.
But at that same time, it is clearly showing rotation. In terms of are we seeing anything, oh wow, what a difference on that scan.
So you can see how Mark was mentioning the greens and the reds.
Apart.
Right, I mean, we don't really have that signature at all anymore. So obviously, we still have a tornado warning. This thing pulsed up, has come back down, and this thing is going fast, 35 miles an hour down to the south and east, which means if you are in Adair County, this is not going to be a long-lived storm for your area. I know you see the tornado warning going until 8:15, but trust me, probably within 15-20 minutes, that storm will be out of your area. Seeing lower signs, but just another good point, Mark. We're looking at a storm, and the radar beam is about 5,200 feet up in the atmosphere. So really not sampling the lower end of the storm. And that's kind of difficult from, our vantage point. The farther away from the radar you get, the higher you're looking up into the atmosphere. And when you have a tornado, that's going to be something at the surface. So really it's tough to translate this in terms of the distance. But obviously, if you're east of Kane Valley, it's a troublesome little storm. It has some gustier winds. And so far, this is the first tornado warning we've seen. It's been a hail story so far today, seeing that ping pong, the golf ball size hail. So I know this is something that we haven't discussed, but obviously the potential's there.
And Rick, what we're going to do here, what I want to do is let's take a look at the evolution here. I think sometimes it gives you a sense of what's happened, where we are, and it can help to assess where we are in terms of rotation now, what caused the tornado warning, and whether we're in a similar scenario. So Rick's going to back this up a little bit, and you can see there was no tornado warning here. This is when it was coming out of the Taylor County area. So what you're going to notice here is bright greens, bright reds, even into the pinkish color. Now what you can see initially is it's very far apart. Now as Rick starts to move forward, you're going to see that the green and the red, the area of rotation starts to tighten up, crosses over the county line, and this is right when the tornado warning was issued. We have these reds and greens next to each other. Rick noted that the rotation strength here was somewhere in the neighborhood of around 60, 65 miles an hour. Continuing to where we are now. Yeah.
There's your latest scan.
It doesn't look the same, does it? So go back 2 scans here, and you're going to see this is the greens and reds. Very tight, very noticeable. Now we move to the current scan, and it is very clear. So we've seen very clearly the rotation coming down on that. All that said, Rick, I want to do, Matthew here put up the storm track here, but what we're going to do here is we're going to cover a couple parts to this. So the 10 minutes from now in the Ella area, 16 minutes from now in the Sano area, Humboldt 20 minutes from now, and Decatur 23 minutes from now. But what I want to do, Rick, is I want to go through our exercise. Are we looking at anything that shows rotation? And so when we assess rotation, one of the things we need to do is identify where the rotation is green. Rick, can we put normalized rotation on here? It may paint a little bit of a better picture, but it kind of looks like a spread out mess. We'll go back 2 scans and you're going to be able to see where it was obviously quite noticeable, and then into the current scan where the rotation nosed off. There is a huge change here. Now with this, let's look to see in this area, is there any debris that could be lofted? So you're like, oh, that's it near Nifley. So what I'm going to tell you is we need to look at the reflectivity. This is critical in determining where is that lower area? Right here. This is in a non-rain area. This is an inflow into the thunderstorm. So there's nothing in there that indicates that there could or there was a tornado on the ground at this point. Number 2, we're looking pretty high up in that thunderstorm. And that makes quite a bit of difference when you're looking so high up in that thunderstorm. Matthew, you've been looking at this on StormView HD, and then I'm going to come over to you. So the rotation, you know, you and I were talking about this earlier when we kind of started this off. That rotation, we said, this is something we're keeping an eye on. And then we saw the rotation come up, and this is an evolution where we saw rotation increase, and then we saw it start to tail.
Yeah, and I think that tends to happen with a scenario like this where we are losing some of that daytime heating. We've eaten through a lot of the energy in the atmosphere. So usually if a tornado is formed, usually it's going to be on the weaker end, and it's going to be not too long, you know, very brief. And so at this point, I think that's exactly what we've seen so far, a quick uptick in the winds parallel with each other, and as they start to rotate some. And it was only a couple of scans, right?
And Rick, you're looking still on StormView 3D. We're getting scans about every 2.5 to 3 minutes here. Your assessment on that rotation now versus about 3 to 4 minutes ago.
I mean, obviously, the same holds. This thing is definitely falling apart, ripping to shreds. Does not have the same appearance it once did. I mean, definitely for a second there, we kind of jumped up. We all three were like, all right, you know, this is something. Get ready. We have a possible tornado. And once we saw that tornado warning issued, it quickly came down. I mean, this is no jab at the Weather Service. They, you know, got that out as quick as possible. But that's the way these things work. It is an instant. And we saw this case yesterday, how quickly these things can shoot up simply because the wind energy in the atmosphere is extremely strong. Yes, like Matthew mentioned, a lot of this area in the air mass has been worked over by these rounds of rain, rounds of storms. So again, that's probably the one thing it is starting to lack is some of the CAPE, some of the fuel, some of the energy. But obviously the winds, what we lack in fuel, we're making up for that in some of the wind energy.
And you know, that's the thing. We knew that the wind energy would come up at a certain point, at a certain time here. We know that we've reached that point where the wind energy is now starting to increase some. The watch remains in effect here. Severe thunderstorm, tornado watch for Perry, Meade, Hardin, LaRue, Marion counties, points to the south. We now have a severe thunderstorm warning also for the southern part of Grayson County. So let's take a look at that storm as well as we move over to Grayson County. And this, I think it is worth watching. And I'll show you a couple of things here. Matthew's got the storm that we're looking at. And Matthew, the thing I note the most when I see this is obviously there's not much difference here. We've got 60-mile-an-hour winds and 1-inch hail, but there's that threat. And I really want to note that there's tornado possible on this, Matthew. And sometimes the Weather Service uses this as a tool. So they have tools in the toolbox. The toolbox would be you can issue a tornado warning, a severe thunderstorm warning, severe or tornado possible. I think a lot of times when people hear tornado possible, like, you know what, it's a severe thunderstorm, nothing to worry about. But storms, these kind, can produce tornadoes with little notice.
It's a preemptive thing in that way because you are looking at something and you're saying, hey, you know, I could see this forming a tornado down the line. It's not saying, well, I'm not really sure if there's one in there right now. It's that I think that there's a possibility of one forming in a little bit. So we want to put a severe thunderstorm warning on it for 60-mile-per-hour winds, for the 1-inch hail. But we also want to mention that there is some rotation in there, and that's why we put a tornado possible tag. But again, not clear and cut that there's a tornado happening right now.
And Rick, you're still looking at the other storms, so let's get a sense here, and I'm going to walk over to the wall here briefly. I want to just do an assessment on both of these storms. So we've got the storm that right now is in Adair County near the Nifley area. I really find it quite valuable for us when we can look at where it was, where it is now, and where it's going. So Rick DeLuca has on here what we refer to as the velocity. And just so you know, radar works in that it can see what's moving towards it, it can see what's moving away from it. It cannot see any other wind in any other direction. It only can see what's moving towards it and away from it. And this is actually quite valuable when you're trying to find tornadoes, because we're looking at air coming towards the radar, air going away from the radar. Now this, from here to here, is quite a bit of distance. If this is tight, what we saw earlier, what we call gate to gate, this means one radar beam, gate, and I'll explain what the gate is. So the radar measures a small amount of air that we refer to as a gate. So if it looks at that one piece of air and then the piece of air next to it, it has opposite winds that are blowing very strong. We know that the rotation is quite tight. And Rick, let's back this up maybe 3-4 scans, and you'll notice the difference here in terms of what we had. And this was rotation in the northern part of Adair County. You're going to see the difference is dramatic. There's the scan. Very notable. Green gates, red gates, right on top of each other, what we call gate-to-gate shear. Gate-to-gate shear means that the rotation's tight and it may be able to drop a tornado. We saw this last night, obviously, in what occurred in the Clark County area. And then as we move this out into the present, we just see that the rotation is much, 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 much more diffuse. And the threat has obviously lowered some. So in this storm, there's nothing right now that is intense as it was. The tornado warning is in effect till 8:15, and obviously we're going to stay with this. I say this all the time, but it doesn't matter if you're a most populous county or least populous. You know, lives are lives, and that is what we do. We're here just to make sure that we protect you and we walk through the storms. You know, we've gone through this for a long time together, and I think that, you know, we will always tell you when we have high concern, when we have lower concern, and what is going on. So here's the severe thunderstorm with the tornado possible. What are we looking at in terms of rotation on this one? I mean, is there some? Maybe a little bit. Am I overly concerned about this thing producing a tornado right now? The answer is no. We're going to continue to keep an eye on this. Rick, you can put on normalized rotation here. Generally, what we look at with normalized rotation is we look for the greens to pop in there. And that would mean, we call it green. We just say green means go. And it is quite effective, actually, at where we generate tornadoes. But there is a little bit of a hail spike here. So I assume if we go over to reflectivity, we're going to see the hail core here. Yep, there it is. So just a little bit of radar meteorology. This area right here is where the hail core is. So this is going to be north of Brooklyn. This is going to be basically just south of Caneyville. So this is right along the Butler, Grayson County line. And I just want to show you then back to that correlation coefficient. You can see it detects the hail, and then it shows this spike away from it. When you see a spike that radiates away from the radar, it means there's a very notable hail core in there. So that is a good signal there. Bottom line here is not overly concerned, and even to be honest, if there was rotation, that may have slipped out of the Grayson County area. So overall, we're looking at two areas where we have possible storms, and Matthew can put a track on that, but we're looking at two areas where we have possible storms that are moving towards our area, and we're just continuing to keep an eye on these storms as they're making a march towards the east-southeast. So Matthew's got a track on this. I'm going to go over there back to you. Approximate times on this as that storm continues to move across the Butler and the Grayson County line.
Yeah, I mean, we got about, what, 12 minutes until Jetson, 20 minutes until Big Reedy, Sunfish, 26 minutes for you all. Bee Spring, Kyrock, well north of 30 minutes until it gets there. They're not real fast movers. Most of these are moving about 30 to 35 miles per hour at this point. Undoubtedly have seen faster storms in other areas across the country today that have definitely had some bad weather. But here at this point, I do think that most of the severe weather threat it's obviously not over. We've got severe thunderstorm warnings out there right now, but it's much, much lower in these areas that have already gotten some of these bad storms, the large hail. And at this point, I do think that some straight line winds, very weak rotation within both of these warned areas, the severe thunderstorm warning and the tornado warning.
And to your point, Matthew, Weather Service has said that the rotation has become more weak and broad, which is basically what we said. And I'm going to just note that their verbiage is likely.
Yeah.
Likely to cancel at 8:05. Is that a guarantee that we're going to cancel? The word is likely, and we take it for what it means. We know that they're going to continue to keep an eye on it, but unless something changes dramatically, their view is what Matthew noted and what Rick noted. And Rick, you're looking at it on StormView 3D. Since we've got another 3 minutes on this warning, you know, the Weather Service is assessing. Do they want to stay with it? Well, here's the reality. If this storm even was to uptick in terms of its intensity or rotation, it probably only has 5 minutes left in our viewing area as well. It doesn't mean that we ignore other counties. You know, sometimes I'm asked about that. We don't choose the counties of our coverage area. That's determined outside. But nonetheless, this would leave our county area, and it looks like the Weather Service just released that. Matthew, I'm going to go over to the weather wall real quickly, and what I'm going to do is on StormView HD, if we could, let's just do a wide perspective on what we have in our area. That way we can see all of the area, what's going on, and what's moving towards us. So what we know here in Louisville, is there anything that you need to be concerned about? So the atmosphere has been rained over significantly. What does that mean? Well, Matthew alluded to this earlier. Fuel. Fuel's warmth and high dew points. You're like, Mark, it's pretty humid outside. We agree on that. But when you rain the air mass down, you take out the fuel. And I use this analogy quite frequently. The new Z06, I mean, that thing is crazy fast. 0 to 60, you know, in around the 2.5 second area, which is crazy fast. You got to put that premium fuel in there, and that car goes off like a rocket. Now what happens if you put water in the gas tank? Everybody knows what's going to happen. It's not going to do anything. That's the key. We've worked over our air mass. Now, we do have strong to severe thunderstorms to our west near Carbondale and Mount Vernon. Generally, what happens with this is after an air mass has been worked over, the storms will then fuel chase. So the logic here would dictate they're going to go towards Madisonville and then move towards Tennessee. That's the most likely scenario. Severe thunderstorm warning has now been canceled, the tornado warning has been canceled now for Adair County. And we still have a severe thunderstorm warning for the southern part of Grayson County. We did get a report, Rick, you've got a report here that the Kentucky Mesonet did measure some strong winds as the storm was north of the Columbia area.
Yeah, 55-mile-per-hour winds from a Mesonet site, which, you know, gives it a little validity, which is real. I mean, and remember, severe thunderstorm threshold begins at 58. So if anything really gets close to verifying at least a severe thunderstorm warning.
Agreed.
But like we said, that tornado threat has dramatically dropped. We don't see that tight and bright signature that we once had when it entered Adair County.
So what I'm going to say here is, I think all of us are probably a little bit hungry. It's been a busy couple of days. We've got eyes on radar. We're going to continue to keep eyes on radar. We've got a tornado watch in effect till 10 p.m. We'll continue to watch the storms. Tornado warnings have been allowed to expire. We're going to continue to keep an eye on the storm. Remember, severe thunderstorm warning with tornado possible in Grayson County, not a tornado warning, so we'll continue to watch it. If we get more warnings, we'll come back in. Keep it right here on WDRB for continuing weather updates.
Get